Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go! The world succumbed to flames and destruction. Colossal beasts roamed freely through the ruins, marking the definitive end of civilization. There was no mercy for the few survivors. The creatures brutally hunted and devoured anyone who still breathed amidst the rubble. However, a single young man still stood in hell. Exhausted and wounded, he refused to fall, even when his body begged for rest. It was then that the true origin of the nightmare revealed itself. The demon lord, Lan Yue, descended onto the battlefield to claim his final victory. The entity looked at the human with utter contempt. He mocked the boy's futile resistance, considering all of humanity unworthy of existing. Lan Yue didn't just intend to kill. He prepared a decisive blow, determined to drain the survivor's very life essence to the last drop. An overwhelming energy began to concentrate. The air became heavy, charged with the promise of total and inevitable annihilation. The demon attacked with voracious greed. He saw the young man not as an opponent, but only as food to increase his own power. The impact was devastating. The demonic force collided against the human, sweeping the landscape with incalculable violence. The destruction seemed absolute. The evil energy swallowed everything that remained in that place, sealing the fate of the confrontation. The young man felt excruciating pain as he was hit. His body seemed to be disintegrating, but his consciousness stubbornly remained. Faced with death, memories surfaced. Remorse consumed him as he remembered those he failed to protect, his sister and his master. But the end didn't come as expected. Instead of succumbing, an unknown force awakened within him, cracking his own skin with unbearable internal pressure. The demon lord recoiled, perplexed and alarmed. The prey he intended to devour was reacting in a way that defied logic. The protagonist's body reached the critical limit. He wasn't absorbed. He became a bomb of pure energy, ready to explode his own existence. Fragments of a painful memory cut through the young man's mind, bringing back the final moment alongside his sister. That cruel memory mingled with images of a distant past, where his family was still united and happy. However, the darkness of the nightmare was suddenly replaced by a stable, artificial light on the ceiling. The survivor opened his eyes with difficulty, feeling the weight of reality return to his body. He realized that he was no longer on the battlefield, but lying in a comfortable bed, bathed in peaceful sunlight. Confused and disoriented, the boy sat up in bed, trying to process how he was still breathing. The surrounding environment was clean and organized, completely different from the ruins, which made him question where the hell he was. Driven by doubt and disbelief, the protagonist ran to the window to examine the outside world. What his eyes saw was shocking. A vibrant campus, full of students living normal days, with no signs of war. The young man's mind went into immediate conflict. The apocalypse and destruction he knew seemed to have never existed there. Desperately needing to confirm his own reality, he moved away from the window and faced the bathroom mirror. The reflection stared back at him, showing the terror and confusion stamped on his intact face. Suddenly, a sharp digital noise interrupted his thoughts, echoing not in the room, but inside his head. He froze, realizing that the sound carried a message that only he could hear. A holographic interface appeared in the reflection, confirming that the power awakened in death had completely merged with him. The memory of that fateful day invaded Si Chen's mind violently. The terror still felt fresh. He recalled how colossal creatures descended from the skies, obliterating the city and civilization in moments. Humanity was hunted mercilessly by the shadows. There was no warning, just a silent massacre. That moment marked the beginning of the definitive end. The hope of resistance was crushed before it was even born. Amidst the smoking ruins and chaos, the young man lost everything he knew and loved. However, just before total darkness consumed him, he seized an impossible opportunity. Back in the present, Si Chen stared at his own hands, feeling a strange and new energy pulsing through his veins. A floating notification confirmed the unthinkable. The fusion with the power of gluttony was complete and stable. The survivor examined the holographic interface carefully. His name shone at the top of the status screen, awaiting inspection. Upon reading the attributes, shock hit him. All of his basic levels were at the absolute maximum limit. Si Chen narrowed his eyes, suspicious. Those numbers defied any known logic for a newly awakened person. Beyond the physical attributes, the system revealed affinity with multiple elements. A limitless combat potential opened before him. This contrasted brutally with his previous life. He bitterly remembered being weak and humiliated for years at school. The irony of the situation became clear to the protagonist. His past weakness was exactly what led him to that hospital bed, but reality had changed drastically. A digital glitch in his vision suggested that his return carried secrets yet to be revealed. Si Chen examined the options presented by the system, focusing on a class that promised lethal speed and electrical mastery. The Lightning Assassin's stats were impressive, offering supernatural agility and devastating critical attacks. He mentally visualized the power in action, imagining electricity tearing through the battlefield with deadly precision. It was a force capable of annihilating enemies in the blink of an eye, something that would be invaluable for his survival. However, his concentration was broken when someone abruptly opened the door to the room. A familiar face appeared in the doorway. It was Ma Long, someone the protagonist didn't expect to meet again so soon. The newcomer rushed to him in a panic, grabbing him by the shoulders and desperately checking if his friend was injured. Si Chen realized that Ma Long was looking through the floating panel, confirming that the system interface was invisible to others. The friend continued to shake and examine him, relieved but still agitated by the scare he had received. While Ma Long chattered non-stop, the survivor just watched him in silence, feeling the weight of that mundane interaction. Suddenly, the bespectacled boy interrupted his speech, surprised to notice that Si Chen's muscles seemed much stiffer and stronger than before. The protagonist looked at him melancholically, painfully remembering that this friend would be brutally murdered in the early days of the apocalypse. Ignoring the introspective moment, Ma Long pushed him again, eager to get him out of there and show him something. Without accepting refusals, he dragged Si Chen out of the room, insisting that they needed to hurry. They went out into the daylight, coming across the campus sports courts, still peaceful and oblivious to the impending horror. Life on campus continued at its usual carefree pace. For Si Chen, however, that peaceful atmosphere where skills were used for leisure seemed like a fragile illusion about to shatter. The other students spent their energies on sports and friendly competitions, completely unaware of the catastrophic future that was approaching. Their ignorance was a blessing that the protagonist no longer possessed. Ma Long couldn't understand his friend's distant behavior and demanded answers. Si Chen, however, walked in silence, carrying the weight of a knowledge that would change everything. The bespectacled boy continued to complain, but his trivial complaints sounded like background noise. For someone who had already seen the end of the world, that conversation seemed insignificant. As they crossed the courtyard, Si Chen felt the familiar breeze, but his mind was far away. He knew that this tranquility was just the calm before the storm. Suddenly, the sunny image of the school was overlaid with memories of the ruins. The memory of his own figure, lonely and surrounded by destruction, violently invaded his thoughts. The young man understood the urgency of his situation. There was no time to lose. He needed to formulate an immediate plan to gain power before the disaster began. The only hope lay in rapid evolution. He needed to level up and reach a level of strength that would allow him to defy the cruel fate that awaited humanity. The memories of the beasts and the massacre were too vivid. He recalled the brutality with which lives were taken, a carnage that stained his thoughts red. Si Chen remembered how it all began, with the emergence of dimensional rifts and the arrival of monsters, transforming urban areas into restricted death zones. In that ruthless reality, most people were doomed to stagnation in the lower ranks. Only a select minority possessed the potential to ascend and truly fight. And now, here he was back to square one. The system indicated the beginning of his journey, but he brought with him the experience of a lifetime of wars. His cold calculations were abruptly interrupted. Si Chen's battle instinct, sharpened by survival, detected a projectile approaching at high speed. It wasn't a deadly attack, just a sports accident. Poor Ma Long, without his friend's sharp reflexes, ended up serving as an involuntary shield for the violent impact. The blow was accurate, knocking the boy down instantly. While Ma Long groaned on the ground, The gravity of Si Chen's thoughts was momentarily broken by the painful comedy of everyday school life. The group responsible for the throw watched from the top of the stairs. They showed no concern for the accident they had just caused, maintaining an attitude of total indifference. The leader of the gang offered no apologies. On the contrary, he mocked the situation, scoffing at the victim's resistance with a sarcastic comment. Ma Long, bleeding and shaken, instinctively blamed his own luck. The fear of confronting the aggressors paralyzed him, making him accept the blame for being hit. The delinquents remained in their elevated position, exerting silent pressure on the two students below, expecting total submission. Their arrogance was palpable. The group knew they were at the top of the school hierarchy and took advantage of every second of this dominance to intimidate the weaker ones. The bully claimed the block as his exclusive territory. He twisted the logic of the situation, trying to make the victims believe they were to blame for being in his way. Terrified of the consequences, Ma Long bowed immediately. He begged for forgiveness in a humiliating way, offering to buy drinks just to appease the tyrant's fury. However, Si Chen intervened before the submission continued. The survivor coldly declared that the dynamic was wrong and that the apology should come from the aggressors. The atmosphere on the staircase changed instantly. The group fell silent, realizing that their unquestionable authority was being challenged for the first time. The leader's smile disappeared, replaced by disbelief. He couldn't process the audacity of someone who dared to demand redress from him. Ma Long looked at his friend in pure horror. He couldn't understand why Si Chen would choose to provoke such dangerous people and make the situation worse. The protagonist, however, maintained his position. He faced the group without showing the slightest sign of the fear or subservience they expected to find. The aggressor's confusion soon turned into perverse amusement. He found that sudden and unexpected display of courage from a common target ridiculous. But Si Chen's gaze changed drastically. The murderous intent he had cultivated in the ruins of the end of the world began to surface, focused on his opponents. For the young man who faced real demons, this was not a simple school fight. His mind switched to combat mode, ready to teach a definitive lesson. The water exploded violently with the sudden impact, soaking everything around. The gang leader forced the victim's head against the sink, maintaining a firm grip while his cronies watched with sadistic pleasure. Si Chen struggled instinctively, his legs kicking in the air in a desperate search for oxygen. The other delinquents just watched the scene, treating the suffering of others as a casual spectacle. Ma Long, overcoming his own terror, shouted for them to stop this senseless brutality. The boy with glasses recoiled instinctively, fearing that his intervention would turn him into the next target. The aggressor just smiled disdainfully, arrogantly questioning why he should interrupt his fun. Without hesitation, he plunged Si Chen's face into the water again, completely ignoring the protests. The group's laughter echoed through the bathroom, drowning out the sound of the water and the struggle for breath. For that school tyrant, the humiliation of the weakest was the only source of genuine joy. Bored with the lack of reaction, the aggressors decided to leave, leaving Si Chen lying on the floor while Ma Long ran to help him. The friend held the survivor by the shoulders, checking with panic to see if he was injured or conscious. Si Chen remained with his head down, the water running from his hair and concealing any sign of life in his eyes. A hoarse and exhausted whisper escaped his lips, lamenting the insistence of those who didn't know when to stop. The gang leader stopped in his tracks immediately, realizing that the victim had dared to murmur something. Gongcheng savored the moment of superiority. He looked down with contempt, certain that no one there would dare to challenge him. The bully arrogantly questioned why his orders had not been followed. He expected total servitude from those he considered inferior, demanding drinks as if they were tributes. Ma Long panicked immediately. The boy stammered frantic apologies and promised to fix the mistake in an instant, desperate to avoid a beating. However, Si Chen remained motionless. The young survivor just watched the scene coldly, without showing even a trace of the fear they expected from him. The lack of immediate submission confused the aggressor. He stopped, finding it strange that someone dared not to tremble before his presence. Ma Long noticed his friend's defiant attitude and froze. Terror took hold of him as he imagined the brutal consequences of that insolence. Gongcheng decided it was time to teach a lesson. He activated his abilities without hesitation, ready to use brute force against anyone who disrespected him. The so-called flower soldier walked towards them with the absolute confidence of someone who thought he was the untouchable king of that small school world. Si Chen, on the other hand, just analyzed the threat. His battle instincts, forged in the apocalypse, assessed the opponent in a fraction of a second. The bully continued his theatrical approach across the courtyard, displaying his powers to intimidate his prey and impress the audience. But for someone who saw the end of the world, this was ridiculous. Si Chen judged that display of strength as mediocre and completely ineffective. The crowd around stirred, eager for the sadistic spectacle. Everyone expected to see the aggressor crush the weakest again, as he always did. For the spectators, the result was obvious. The school hierarchy dictated that the two students considered most useless were about to be massacred. Gongcheng positioned himself right behind the young man, using his physical presence to impose dominance. He was sure that fear would soon appear. He released his toxic energy directly into Si Chen's personal space, a silent and poisonous ultimatum before delivering the first blow. Gongcheng stopped immediately, in disbelief. The gang leader couldn't accept the audacity of that whisper, and demanded, with a veiled threat in his voice, that the boy repeat what he had said. The aggressor's fury manifested physically. He clenched his fist tightly, preparing to crush any insubordination with immediate, brute violence. Si Chen, however, did not back down. With a glacial stare and disturbing calm, the survivor issued a final warning, ordering the group to stay away from him and his friend permanently. Gongcheng's response was instantaneous. Completely ignoring the warning, he launched a devastating punch, determined to silence the insolent youth with brute force. The bully roared as he attacked, convinced that the boy needed to learn his place in the school hierarchy through pain, as so many times before. But the expected impact never came. With frightening ease and sharp reflexes, Si Chen intercepted the brutal blow in the air, stopping the aggressor's fist as if it were nothing. Gongcheng tried to pull back, but felt trapped. Si Chen's iron grip completely immobilized his opponent, while sparks of tension began to crackle in the air. The audience froze in absolute shock. The students around couldn't process how the usual target of bullying had neutralized the leader's attack so easily. The logic of that school environment seemed to have broken. The spectators questioned their own sanity, as they knew that Si Chen hadn't even awakened his powers yet. The public humiliation ignited even greater rage in Gongcheng. He refused to accept reality, shouting that an unawakened failure could never overcome him. Si Chen's grip, however, only tightened. He began to apply crushing pressure, turning the aggressor's hand into a painful and inescapable trap. The survivor decided it was the perfect time for a practical test. Coldly, he invoked the mysterious system to activate a drastic change in his own essence. A new identity was forged instantly in the face of danger. The system recognized and reclassified Si Chen under a new and lethal combat specialization. Pure electrical energy began to crackle violently around his body. The newly acquired power flooded his veins, rewriting his physical attributes and granting him supernatural speed. Electricity coursed through his arm, ready to be released. Si Chen now wielded a lethal force, rising far beyond the level that any student there could imagine. Ma Long could barely formulate a sentence. Shock paralyzed his mind as he saw his friend react, instead of cowering as usual. Si Chen, on the other hand, maintained absolute calm. He focused the newfound power on his fingertips, preparing a painful lesson. Gongcheng's arrogance turned into blind fury. He roared, refusing to accept that his authority was being challenged publicly. The bully hardened his fist, fully confident in his combat ability. He intended to crush any resistance with a definitive and brutal blow. Without hesitation, Gongcheng advanced with the full weight of his body. He ignored any sign of danger, focused only on destroying the target in front of him. But Si Chen was faster. He intercepted the attack head-on, channeling static electricity into a devastating counterattack. The energy-charged fist collided violently against the aggressor. The speed of the movement made any attempt at defense impossible. The impact was explosive. The kinetic force, amplified by the electrical discharge, hit Gongcheng directly, sweeping away his offensive stance. The gang leader was thrown backward, as if he weighed nothing. The violence of the blow sent him flying across the schoolyard, colliding with the ground. The spectators gaped, unable to process the scene. The reality that the flower soldier fell with a single punch seemed impossible. Panic took over Ma Long. He shouted in confusion, trying to understand how his fragile friend had become capable of such an absurd feat. Si Chen remained standing, enveloped in residual energy. The crowd murmured in fear, questioning whether that was really the same boy they knew. Fallen and humiliated, Gongcheng tasted the bitter taste of blood. Hatred burned more than the injuries as he cursed his opponent. In an act of pure desperation and wounded pride, he grabbed Si Chen's leg. The refusal to accept defeat outweighed his instinct for self-preservation. Si Chen just looked down. The expression on his face was not of fear, but of a calculating coldness in the face of that pathetic stubbornness. Si Chen released his murderous intent, letting the energy flow freely. He decided that he would no longer hide his true nature. The opponent, blinded by rage and ignoring the imminent danger, advanced with a lethal blow, shouting death threats. However, to the protagonist's sharpened reflexes, that attack seemed to move in slow motion. The impact was abruptly interrupted. Si Chen blocked the brute force with terrifying ease, stopping the fist in mid-air. Without hesitation, he twisted the aggressor's limb, breaking his posture and preparing a merciless counterattack charged with electricity. The young man's expression hardened. At that moment, he didn't see a classmate, but an enemy to be neutralized. He muttered a cold sentence, sealing the bully's fate even before delivering the final blow. With an explosive movement, Si Chen used the enemy's own inertia to hurl him violently towards the ground. The force of the impact was devastating, creating a shockwave that reverberated throughout the opponent's body. The aggressor was thrown through the air as if he weighed nothing, completely defenseless against Si Chen's physical superiority. His trajectory ended brutally, colliding against the ground and raising a cloud of destruction. The bully, once arrogant, now lay collapsed against the wall, injured and struggling just to breathe. A heavy silence fell over the courtyard. The spectators, once lively, now retreated terrified before that display of power. Ma Long watched everything in absolute shock, unable to reconcile the image of his shy friend with the overwhelming strength he had just witnessed. As the dust settled, the only question that remained in everyone's stunned mind was how Si Chen had become so powerful overnight. Si Chen maintained his focus, concentrating entirely on the interface that appeared before his eyes. He needed to understand the extent of his capabilities in this new reality. The young man analyzed the data displayed by the system. To his surprise, all his physical and elemental attributes were at the maximum limit, contradicting his lower numerical level. Energy crackled around his body as he clenched his fist. The protagonist realized that, regardless of what the system said, his real power transcended common classifications. With a devastating movement, Si Chen confirmed his hypothesis. He concluded that his current brute strength was more than enough to subdue any low rank awakened. However, the adrenaline of combat did not subside. The young man's gaze remained fixed and predatory, indicating that his fury had not yet been fully satiated. The opponent collided violently against the wall, defeated. Si Chen, however, felt a pang of confusion when he noticed that his stats remained unchanged even after the victory. Ignoring the system's lack of reward, he grabbed the bully by the collar. The murderous aura emanating from Si Chen terrified the spectators, making it clear that he was not an ordinary student. Before the worst happened, a new presence interrupted the confrontation. Firm footsteps echoed, signaling the arrival of someone with enough authority to intervene. The student council vice president emerged, exuding confidence. With a rigid posture, she decreed that the punishment inflicted on the aggressor had already exceeded acceptable limits. She kept a smile on her face, but her words carried a veiled threat. The girl made it clear that any further aggression would not be tolerated under her watch. Si Chen released Gongcheng's inert body, allowing him to collapse to the ground. The protagonist decided not to challenge school authority at that moment, ending the physical clash. The young man cast a skeptical look at the representative. He noticed the suspicious speed with which the council intervened, although he had no real intention of causing permanent damage to his opponent. Around him, panic set in among the students. Si Chen understood that, by demonstrating such power, he had become a target, and that problems would continue to haunt him. The delinquents who previously mocked him now hid, trembling. Genuine fear was etched on their faces as they realized they had severely underestimated the school's weakest prey. Without wasting any more time, Si Chen turned his back on the frightened crowd. His friend ran to accompany him, eager to get away from the scene of the conflict as quickly as possible. The woman smiled disdainfully as she read the report. The student's reputation as weakest and poorest seemed to amuse her. Night fell over the campus, bringing silence only outside the men's dormitory. Inside, Ma Long was shouting, desperately trying to make them believe him. He swore that Si Chen had truly awakened. The boy acted out the fight's movements, enthusiastically describing how Si Chen had knocked the aggressors to the ground. Xiang Zuo, however, remained skeptical in his chair. The core mage only asked where the supposed hero was. Annoyed, he pushed Ma Long's forehead violently. The mage argued that a true awakened would never need that basic training. From the computer, Xiang Yu supported his colleague. The Flora enchanter concluded that the blow to the head had left Ma Long delirious. Xiang Zuo stood up to impose the harsh reality. He reminded them that they were all the 4 worst ranked of the year, an immutable fact. The mage focused energy in his hand to claim authority. In that room of failures, he decided that he was number 1. He intimidated Ma Long, boasting about being the only bearer of an offensive combat class in the dormitory. Xiang Zuo flexed his arm, ridiculing the idea of Si Chen being special. In his arrogance, he felt that only he had gotten stronger. The discussion ceased when Xiang Yu reminded everyone of the fatal deadline. The final evaluation before graduation would take place the next day. Far away, the day's training was ending. The students bowed respectfully as the instructor left. The white-haired man, however, stopped for a moment. Something in his thoughts made him suspicious before leaving. Fate was sealed. The energy portal marked the entrance to the demonic lair, the location of the final rank E test. An overwhelming and imposing presence suddenly manifested at the location. Gong Ting, the student council president, arrived to assess the situation, accompanied by his trusted advisor. He found Gong Chung in the shadows, still recovering from the beating he had taken. The younger brother, consumed by hatred, complained furiously about the public humiliation he suffered at the hands of the protagonist. Gong Ting observed his brother's deplorable state, listening to his complaints with an unsettling calm. With a cold smile, the president decided he would take control and personally deal with the threat. Later, the brutality of the conflict gave way to the elegance of a dinner, where Si Chen's fate would be decided. Gong Ting's companion, however, questioned what the exact strategy would be to address the problem. The president seemed skeptical, doubting that the rookie was really as powerful as the rumors suggested. She reminded him that the school's elite were already under his control, consolidating his absolute power. Furthermore, she pointed out that no one else possessed the privilege of access to the demon lairs that he held. Far away under a relentless storm, Si Chen maintained a training pace that no one could keep up with. The young man ignored the rain and fatigue, focused only on strengthening his physical body. He knew that the upper limit of an awakened was directly linked to their raw muscular endurance. However, even pushing his body to the extreme, Si Chen felt that this effort was still far from enough. The demon lair descended upon the human world, bringing immediate ruin. In a single instant, countless lives were mercilessly taken. The survivor held the inert body in his arms, screaming in denial as the rain fell on his irreparable loss. It was the entity known as Wrath who opened the gates of hell. That act allowed the other demon kings to invade and devastate human reality. Si Chen recalled the tragedy with painful clarity. The memory of the destruction still burned alive in his mind, fueling his hatred. His only purpose, the mission that now defined his new existence, was to find and annihilate Wrath. Determination hardened his spirit. The oath of revenge was etched into his soul, pulsing with the promise of retribution. A mundane sound suddenly broke through his dark thoughts. The phone vibrated, bringing him back to the reality of the present. The young man stared at the device, stunned. The situation seemed too surreal to be true in the face of the memories of death he carried. The name displayed on the screen confirmed the impossible. It was a call from someone he believed he had lost forever in the apocalyptic future. With trembling hands, he brought the device to his ear. His voice came out weak as he answered, uncertain if this was real or a delusion. On the other end, a lively voice complained energetically about the numerous missed calls, explaining a trivial delay caused by a competition. The girl laughed carelessly, celebrating the rent payment. Those everyday problems sounded like the sweetest melody to his ears. Si Chen's body trembled uncontrollably under the storm. His sister noticed the strange silence on the other end of the line and was puzzled by the ambient sound. He forced a shaky smile to disguise the overwhelming emotion. The boy tried to keep his voice steady, denying any problem so as not to worry her. Tears finally rolled down, mixing with the rain. The longing to hear that voice, silenced for so long in his memory, overflowed in a painful and pure relief. Si Chen ended the call with a firm promise. He assured his sister that they would meet as soon as the competition was over, and he had good news. The rain masked any trace of emotion on his face. The moment of vulnerability had passed, leaving only determination. He immediately channeled that feeling into training. Ignoring the exhaustion, he forced his body to complete more laps, transforming longing into physical strength. Later, as the dormitory plunged into the silence of the night, he returned furtively so as not to wake the others. The cold shower served to soothe his muscles, but his mind continued to seethe with strategies for the future. Sitting on the bed, he confronted a serious logistical problem. The demon lairs were monopolized by the big guilds, blocking his progress. The social system was rigid. Without power or influence, evolving was almost impossible for an ordinary person. He lay down, pondering his few options. Suddenly, reality shifted. An interface appeared in his vision, announcing that the gluttony system was finally online. The activation was immediate and overwhelming. Si Chen's consciousness was pulled abruptly, disconnecting from his physical body. He felt his stomach churn as he plummeted through an endless void, crossing the barriers of reality. The fall ceased with a heavy impact. He landed on a strange ground, instinctively regaining his balance. The scenery was hellish and alien. A grotesque and organic tower stood in the middle of a red sea, dominating the horizon. Si Chen looked around, completely stunned. He tried to understand how he had been transported from his safe bed to that hostile place. In the real world, his roommate woke up confused, commenting on his friend's exhausting routine, unaware of the supernatural phenomenon next door. But Si Chen's mind was far away. He stared at the monumental structure, trying to decipher the purpose of that sinister tower. The young man assessed his current capabilities in the face of imminent danger. He needed to know if his body could handle what was coming. A pack of dire hounds emerged, blocking his path. They were low-level beasts, but in great numbers. Suddenly, the system initiated a class change process. An unknown energy began to crackle in the boy's hands. The transition was completed, transforming him into a voltaic assassin. Although Si Chen was still confused by the abrupt change, he accepted the new power. His physical attributes were instantly rewritten. The survivor's body adapted to the electricity that now ran through his veins, ready for combat. Without waiting for an invitation, the beasts advanced as a group. Their hungry jaws sought to tear his flesh. The new assassin moved with lightning speed. He intercepted the enemy attack, cutting the creature in half in the blink of an eye. The monster's death generated immediate spoils. The system rewarded the victory with materials, confirming the effectiveness of his blows. It wasn't just luck. Si Chen danced among the enemies, reaping lives in sequence and accumulating rewards at a frenetic pace. Each blow carried a devastating electrical discharge. Brute force was now allied with a supernatural speed that the monsters couldn't keep up with. The carnage translated into pure growth. Experience flowed into him with each enemy slain, strengthening his existence every second. The protagonist realized the golden opportunity he had in his hands. That isolated place was the perfect source to gain experience and evolve without interference. The effort paid off immediately. He leveled up, feeling his strength and speed increase drastically in a matter of moments. A smile of satisfaction appeared on Si Chen's face. He had discovered a demon lair that he could completely dominate alone. The fear had disappeared. Now it was the predator who faced his next prey with absolute coldness, ready to continue the massacre. Si Chen's attack hit the monster head-on, releasing a devastating surge of energy directly against the creature. The blow was fatal, splitting the enemy in half. The system immediately rewarded the young man with experience, confirming his victory and the increase in his level. However, upon observing the carcass of the defeated enemy, a new notification appeared. The system indicated that that body was devourable. Si Chen froze for an instant. That terminology was unprecedented and caught him completely off guard. The young man mentally questioned what that meant. The system seemed to offer an interaction that went far beyond simply looting items. Driven by curiosity, he reached out towards the fallen monster. A strange energy began to react to his command. It was then that comprehension hit him. The true power of gluttony was not just hunger, but the capacity for total absorption. The draining process began violently. The vital essence of the beast was torn from its physical form and pulled towards the protagonist. Si Chen felt that power flow, concentrating on the palm of his hand as the enemy's energy became his. The assimilation ended quickly. The system confirmed that the devouring process had been successfully completed. Upon checking the results, the boy was stunned. He had inherited the attributes of the Doomfang King, including his elemental resistance to cold. Si Chen clenched his fist, testing the new strength that now ran through his veins. The reality of his ability was frightening. He realized the magnitude of his trump card. It wasn't just about stealing attributes, but about converting his defeated enemies into new combat classes. The initial shock gave way to an epiphany. If he could accumulate the powers of everything he killed, his growth potential was infinite. With this revelation, Si Chen's perspective changed completely. He now possessed the key to dominating that hellish world. The demonic entity watched from above, emanating an ancient and hungry malice over the ruins. The system began to process the transfer, channeling a storm of energy directly into the survivor's core. Si Chen launched himself into the attack, colliding his new power against the beast's resistance in an explosion of brute force. The young man realized that the enemy's vital essence had been completely absorbed. The power now belonged to him. The universe of abilities unfolded in his mind, showing the elemental affinities that governed that combat system. He coldly analyzed the data. As a voltaic assassin, his stats and advantages outweighed the monster's natural resistances. A cruel epiphany arose. If he continued to hunt and devour the demonic beasts, his evolution would be infinite. Determination hardened Si Chen's face. He decided that he would accept that predatory fate to ensure his survival. However, the origin of it intrigued him. The protagonist questioned why he had awakened just such an ability. He looked back, facing the colossal structure that stood tall. The demon tower seemed to be the key to all the mysteries. Suddenly, an oppressive aura hit him, heavy enough to make his body tremble in high alert. At the top of the staircase, an armed warrior blocked the way. The opponent claimed to be patiently awaiting his arrival. The mysterious guardian called Si Chen by name, revealing that this encounter was no accident. The dialogue was cut short by a violent blow. The blade came down with a speed that defied all known logic. The young man was forced to retreat sharply, barely managing to avoid the direct impact of that devastating attack. Si Chen bitterly assessed his own condition. He had died seeking the apex, but now found himself trapped in a body with insignificant combat power. Fate, cruel as always, placed an insurmountable obstacle before him. This was no ordinary enemy, but an S-rank boss. The level disparity was absurd, crushing any logical chance of victory. He wondered how a monster of that magnitude existed there. But what really chilled his blood wasn't the opponent's brute strength. It was the inexplicable fact that this creature knew his name. The combat exploded into a frenetic exchange of blows. Even at a disadvantage, the young survivor refused to yield, parrying the deadly attacks. However, the difference in power took its toll. Si Chen's defense was broken, and he was violently thrown back by the impact. He tried to get back on his feet amidst the rubble, feeling the crushing weight of that supernatural force on his wounded body. The Guardian watched his prey's tenacity with scorn. To the entity, that resistance seemed like just a futile effort. Si Chen wiped the blood from his face, his eyes burning with defiance. Submission was not an option, no matter how desperate the situation. The creature then reinforced its sinister proposal. He offered the young man the unique chance to stay there and guard the demonic tower by his side. The suggestion of being trapped in that hell, however, sounded like an insult. Si Chen's gaze hardened with a silent and lethal refusal. He steadied his stance, ignoring the pain and exhaustion. His answer would not come with words, but with the murderous intent that emanated from his body. The blood that stained his vision only served as fuel. He decided that he would rather die fighting than accept that eternal servitude. The demon, losing patience, revealed the truth behind his restraint. Si Chen was only alive because he was the only one capable of getting there. That revelation changed the weight of the confrontation. Amidst the mortal remains of other beasts, the young man realized that his presence there was key to something greater. The enemy's power increased drastically, triggering alerts in the system. Lan Yue prepared to end the confrontation with a final display of brute force. Debris floated around the demon lord as he issued an ultimatum. The arrogant entity offered the young man a simple choice: submit or be crushed right there. Si Chen, however, maintained unwavering focus. The protagonist faced the threat head-on and made his decision without hesitation. Instead of retreating, the young man launched himself into the attack. His answer was clear and violent. He chose to fight to kill the opponent. Lan Yue scoffed at that audacity. Considering the attack ridiculous, the demon lord brought down his colossal blade to obliterate the insolent one. However, the devastating blow only found emptiness. Si Chen dodged with pinpoint accuracy, escaping the trajectory of death. The survivor quickly closed the distance. He wasn't just dodging by luck. Every movement was part of a calculated approach. At that critical moment, Si Chen realized that he had already won. He had finally deciphered the hidden pattern in the enemy's attacks. The young man noticed a fatal technical flaw. Before each blow of the blade, there was a tiny delay in the demon's wrist preparation. That fraction of a second was all the protagonist needed. By reading the angle of the applied force, he predicted the exact trajectory of the attack and anticipated the dodge. More importantly, Si Chen identified a second opening. After each attack, the opponent was vulnerable and immobile for a brief moment during the final movement. Taking advantage of this forced pause, the warrior slipped inside the enemy's guard. Lan Yue had no time to react to the invasion of his personal space. Si Chen unleashed his technique, the electric blade. The attack pierced the defenses, discharging a lethal energy directly into the opponent's chest. The blow hit a vital point, triggering an immediate paralysis effect. Even with the abysmal difference in power between them, surgical precision overcame brute force. Having landed the critical hit, the protagonist did not let himself be carried away by greed. He activated a speed boost and retreated instantly, avoiding any desperate counterattack. Si Chen knew that this blow would not be fatal. The goal was just to buy a few precious seconds to ensure his escape. The young man spotted a distant glow in the desolate vastness. That seemed to be the only way out of that hell. Without hesitation, the survivor reached out towards the portal, feeling that freedom was finally within his reach. However, hope suddenly vanished. He landed confused, realizing too late that the path had disappeared. A terrible presence arose behind him. Lan Yue mocked the effort, revealing that the supposed exit was just an illusion left behind. The demon lord praised the boy's cunning in finding a loophole in his attack. The situation, for him, was becoming more and more interesting. Faced with that resistance, the entity recognized Si Chen's potential. He was someone capable of carrying the weight of hope. The protagonist sensed the imminent danger. His instincts screamed, warning that the real test was just beginning. Even cornered, the young man did not give in to panic. He continued to coldly analyze the odds, betting his own life on a risky strategy. The conversation ended with pure violence. A devastating impact shook the ground, marking the restart of the massacre. Lan Yue attacked with full force from the heavens. The battlefield turned into a chaos of destructive energy. The demon's power materialized, condensing in the air to form a creature made of pure ice and death. A colossal dragon charged against Si Chen. The difference in scale between the human and the magic beast was desperate. The clash resulted in a fiery explosion. The survivor was swallowed by the flames and debris of the overwhelming impact. However, the offensive changed shape. Monstrous vines emerged from the shadows, forcing the boy to maneuver in the air to avoid being crushed. The impact of the landing shook the ground, but Si Chen remained firm. He knew that the slightest mistake at that moment would result in his total annihilation. However, amidst the destruction, a familiar sensation invaded his mind. He realized that that energy resonated with something he already knew. Before him, the complete manifestation of the enemy's power rose, emanating an overwhelming pressure that defied any human logic. The young man shuddered as he connected the dots. The truth about the nature of that surreal environment finally came to light, leaving him perplexed. It wasn't a common physical place. Si Chen understood, astonished, that dimension and the colossal tower existed within his own being. The entity watched the boy's reaction with satisfaction. The survival test had been completed, and the final judgment was delivered. For his tenacity and will to live, the young man was declared worthy of inheriting the burden that had been hidden there for so long. Si Chen's eyes widened. The gravity of that statement completely changed the course of his destiny and the understanding of his powers. A sacred object materialized in the air, shining with an intense light that promised both salvation and absolute perdition. That was the definitive access to the sealed secrets. The master key to the dreaded Tower of Darkness was finally presented to him. The voice explained the sinister origin of that place. An eternal prison where Lan Yue imprisoned the essences of the most powerful demons he had ever consumed. The path to supremacy was revealed. To become invincible, Si Chen would need to devour those ancient souls and assimilate their brute force. The artifact floated towards the protagonist, offering itself as an instrument of ascension. He considered the immense weight of that choice. The entity shared his pain, revealing that unbridled quest for power was born from the unjust massacre of his clan by the Demon Kings. Centuries of waiting culminated in that instant of opportunity. Si Chen, absorbing the revelation, recognized the validity of that ancient grudge. Si Chen questioned the reason for all of this, unable to understand why his enemy was handing him such power. Lan Yue, however, celebrated the moment. For the demon, that was the opportunity he had been waiting for ages. The mention of an unknown figure left the young man perplexed. He demanded to know who the Lord was referring to. But the revelation would not be verbal. All the answers he sought were locked in the Tower of Darkness. The demon refused to explain more. It would be up to the boy to go in there and discover the truth for himself. The ultimate goal was clear: to get revenge against those who caused the ruin, using any means necessary. Si Chen finally understood the insane proposal. He should inherit and absorb the powers of that creature. Lan Yue ordered the gates to be opened, initiating the ritual that would change the survivor's destiny. He warned about the internal dangers. The beings imprisoned there were the epitome of cunning and ferocity. There would be no room for weakness. The young man would have to overcome them all and reach the top of the world alone. The structure of reality began to collapse, yielding to the pressure of the ancient magic that was awakening. His mind was flooded with a crimson vision, a harbinger of the sea of blood he would need to cross. The system intervened immediately. The process of devouring the essence began to be loaded. The assimilation was a success. Si Chen obtained the legendary weapon, feeling his strength grow exponentially. Any remaining doubts dissipated. With a sharp look, he accepted the burden and the mission that had been imposed on him. The devouring process has been completed. The system has confirmed the total assimilation of the entity, merging the power of the abyssal demon directly into the user's soul. Si Chen's consciousness abruptly returned. He opened his eyes, feeling the weight of reality fall upon him as he awoke from the spiritual trance. The young man suddenly sat up in bed, gasping for air. His breathing was heavy, and his mind was trying to process the immediate transition between the deadly battle and this awakening. He looked around, confused. The ruined scenery had disappeared, replaced by a common dormitory where other students were concerned with uniforms and trivial routines. Si Chen examined his own chest, looking for the fatal wounds he had suffered. To his surprise, his skin was intact, and his body seemed completely restored. However, proof that none of it had been a dream appeared before him. The system projected the rewards obtained. Power cards and legendary items floated in his private interface. He tried to understand the situation but was interrupted. One of his roommates approached the bed, invading his space with a casual and arrogant attitude. The boy smiled mockingly, determined to provoke him. He mentioned the events of the previous night, mocking the rumors about Si Chen's supposed new strength. In the background, Ma Long shuddered, visibly embarrassed. The friend realized that his exaggerated comments had placed Si Chen at the center of unwanted attention. The provoker leaned in even closer, with a manic look. He challenged Si Chen to prove his worth, treating the situation like a tasteless joke. Si Chen's expression changed instantly. The confusion gave way to an icy focus as he stared at his colleague, assessing the insignificant threat before him. The student bit into his snack with disdain, ignoring the danger. He continued to speak with his mouth full, demonstrating a total lack of respect for the survivor. As the group descended the stairs, the arrogant one explained the power hierarchy. He made a point of classifying Si Chen and Ma Long as inferiors based on obsolete rankings. The loudmouth continued to boast across the courtyard. He celebrated his own growth potential, oblivious to the fact that he was walking next to an awakened predator. School life continued as normal around them. The murmurs and peaceful atmosphere created a surreal contrast for Si Chen, who walked silently between two worlds. Ma Long observed the surroundings, visibly impressed by the magnitude of the event unfolding. The young man with glasses advised his friend to try his best to secure a minimum ranking. Si Chen, however, maintained his indifferent posture in the face of the other's concern. The suggestion of a low ranking sounded almost comical to him. The survivor reflected on the mediocrity of that goal with a slight disdain. They finally arrived at the central courtyard. The crowd of students gathered for the national evaluation ceremony made Ma Long even more agitated. The tranquility was abruptly interrupted. A group of veterans began to force their way through, pushing anyone who was in their path. The leader of the trio advanced with open hostility, silently daring anyone to protest against their rudeness. Upon recognizing the danger, Ma Long panicked. He tried to pull his friend away immediately, fearing a disastrous confrontation. However, Si Chen didn't move an inch. The protagonist remained in his place, refusing to give way to cheap intimidation. The aggressors stopped suddenly. The arrogance on their faces disappeared, replaced by an icy terror as they realized who was blocking their path. To everyone's surprise, the bullies bowed in absolute respect. They greeted Si Chen with the fear of subordinates before a dangerous superior. Ma Long was paralyzed, unable to understand the scene. He questioned internally why those thugs were treating his friend with such deference. The protagonist simply continued his walk, completely ignoring the reverence. He passed by the three as if they were irrelevant. There was a reason for that silence. Si Chen knew that the fear he imposed was the only language they understood. Observing from afar, a new figure analyzed the repercussions. Chiang Di commented on the violent conflict that had occurred the previous day. The student council officer smiled maliciously as he connected the facts. He knew that Si Chen's victim had dangerous family ties at the top of the school hierarchy. The confrontation in the courtyard attracted everyone's attention. The tension between the students increased as they awaited the outcome of that dispute. The spectators whispered, incredulous. They didn't understand why someone of a high level would waste time confronting a supposed failure like Si Chen. The aggressor invaded the protagonist's personal space. He whispered cruel insults, trying to humiliate Si Chen and remind him of his inferior position. The provocation, however, backfired. The bully immediately lost emotional control, shouting in pure frustration at the response he received. Before physical violence exploded, an authoritative voice cut through the air. The external intervention demanded an immediate end to that disorder. The student council president took command of the situation. Coldly, he declared that he had already investigated the facts on his own. His authority was absolute on campus. The subordinate complied with the order without question, bowing and retreating before the school hierarchy. The president maintained a momentary silence. His calculating gaze assessed the scene, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of indifference. Si Chen, in turn, was not intimidated. The young man faced the student leadership with a cold look, analyzing the potential threat. The distraction ended when the ceremony officially began. The instructor announced the activation of the portal for the start of the ranking tests. As they walked away, the rivals regained their arrogance. They decided to ignore what happened, mistakenly concluding that Si Chen posed no danger at all. However, in the high towers, the elite watched everything. They knew exactly that Gong Cheng had been responsible for starting the conflict. From the top of the observation room, the crowd of students below seemed insignificant to those who held the true power. Two imposing figures discussed the event. The man questioned his companion's sudden and unusual interest in that specific day's evaluation. The woman smiled, visibly intrigued. She suspected that finally, someone worthy of real attention had emerged from among the ordinary students. The system summoned the next candidate. Xiang Zuo's profile lit up the main panel, attracting the attention of those present. Without hesitation, the student raised his arm in the middle of the crowd. He was eager to take center stage. The boy's confidence was palpable. He declared his intention to demonstrate once and for all the extent of his power. Xiangzuo walked towards the evaluation device. He entered the machine, ready to be judged. Once isolated inside the chamber, he prepared himself. The environment awaited the release of his magical energy. The testing mechanism used a captured demonic core, specifically designed to absorb and quantify raw power. With a shout of effort, Xiangzuo released everything he had. He bombarded the core with his maximum energy. The organic artifact pulsed violently as it drained the magic. The system calculated the exact limits of the student's ability. The external lights on the machine signaled the end of the process. The calculation had been completed. The test ended, and Xiangzuo left the chamber. The burst of energy had left him visibly worn out. The verdict appeared on the giant screen. For his current strength rating, the system assigned him only a mediocre E level. The instructors recorded the grade indifferently. The performance was bureaucratic, with nothing to justify the student's previous arrogance. In the audience, Ma Long could barely contain his anxiety. He knew that the real spectacle would begin now, with the protagonist's turn. The system completed the analysis by displaying the potential for growth. The letter C appeared, confirming that his future would also be just average. Xiangzuo leaned on the glass structure, desolate. The reality of his mediocre numbers completely destroyed his confident posture. Ma Long tried to console his colleague, assuring him that his and Si Chen's situation was even more deplorable than Xiangzuo's. The scoreboard, however, confirmed the mage's mediocrity. Xiangzuo was nothing more than a rank E with limited potential. The evaluation process continued, with more students crossing the portal to have their levels measured. Ma Long soon obtained his own classification. Being a lower-level rank E, he could barely compete, but he used his own failure to try to normalize the situation. However, something unexpected cut off the conversation. The group's expression instantly changed from resignation to pure shock. A much higher result shone on the giant monitor. A rank D student finally emerged, drawing impressed exclamations from the crowd. The evaluated student did not contain his euphoria and celebrated openly. Having reached rank D with maximum A-level potential was a rare achievement. Faced with such a demonstration of talent, the trio felt the weight of the disparity. The only possible reaction was to lower their heads, defeated by the comparison. The instructors supervising the event noted the trend. That year's crop of students presented an abnormal amount of talent. For students without real combat experience, reaching that level was an impressive feat. Statistically, that was an anomaly. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the courtyard changed. A figure of imposing presence stood out in the crowd, silencing the murmurs. The whispers started again, but now filled with fear and respect. Everyone recognized the arrival of a member of the student council elite. The young man with the intense gaze maintained an icy posture. He awaited his turn with the absolute confidence of someone who knows he is superior to others. The evaluation system identified the candidate on the monitor. Gong Ting was ready to have his power measured. Inside the device, the evaluation core reacted to his presence, pulsing like a living heart connected to the machine. The machine buzzed violently, struggling to process the sudden injection of energy it was receiving. Gong Ting kept his hand firmly on the sensor. He decided that this was the moment to abandon any restraint. The student council president knew that only a full demonstration of strength would cause the impact he wanted. His ambition was clear. He would accept nothing less than becoming a legend in the history of the institution. The evaluation system oscillated while calculating the data. The measurement bars rose frantically. The senior instructor's eyes widened. He could hardly believe the reading that the equipment was showing. The final result shone on the screen. The potential level reached the maximum rating, something rarely seen. The young man remained still in front of the machine. He awaited, with calculated coolness, the inevitable reaction of the audience. Gong Ting knew that this combat exam would define his future. It was the perfect opportunity to consolidate his status. The examiner was sweating cold. The golden color on the monitor confirmed a reality that defied common sense. The students went wild. Shouts of admiration echoed through the hall, extolling the supremacy of their leader. While Ma Long trembled with envy and shock, Si Chen remained impassive. The survivor didn't seem impressed with the spectacle. The evaluators entered a state of urgency. They immediately agreed that they needed to report this anomaly to higher authorities. A talent of that level was considered a national strategic resource. The government would certainly offer special protection and privileges. Gong Ting smiled arrogantly. He had proven his worth and secured his place at the top of the hierarchy. The crowd went into a frenzy upon witnessing a historic result. The confirmation of an S-level potential shook the foundations of the evaluation, leaving everyone in disbelief. From the height of his office, figures of authority watched the chaos below. They recognized that this generation was, in fact, full of exceptional talents. The veteran, president of the university, commented with satisfaction. The presence of so many prodigies perfectly explained his guest's sudden interest in attending in person. He assumed that her attention was focused on the student who had just broken the records. However, the woman reacted with an enigmatic smile, suggesting that he was wrong. The evaluator's interest went far beyond the obvious. She was not only looking for recognized talent, but something that surpassed even the prodigy that everyone was applauding. While the mass of students still reverberated from the shock of the last test, a single young man remained silent, oblivious to the collective euphoria that surrounded him. The wait was over when the instructor called the next candidate. Si Chen looked up, ready to demonstrate what he was capable of. Sem-el. The delinquent leader stared at Si Chen with a predatory smile, amused by the situation. He didn't seem to notice the coldness in the young man's gaze. The mockery exploded into a manic laugh. The aggressor found the idea of an entire dormitory full of lower-level failures gathered in the same place hilarious. While Ma Long remained humiliated on the ground, the bully listed the group's mediocre rankings. He guaranteed that, with that level of power, the only thing they would do in the final exam was embarrass themselves. One of the students, trembling with anger and helplessness, shouted in protest. He tried to defend the group's honor, refusing to accept the destiny of failure that had been imposed on them. However, Si Chen's mind was focused on something bigger. He knew that, in that society, an awakened's destiny was sealed by specific portals and opportunities. Si Chen's name was mentioned amidst the mockery. It all revolved around a single crucial event: the graduation combat exam. That test wasn't just a school exam, it was a dive into the depths of the unknown, where technology and magic merged to test human limits. It was the moment when true potential needed to awaken. A single failure or a moment of weakness in that environment could mean the end of any future. Si Chen, however, saw it from a different perspective. His eyes gleamed with a sinister intensity, aware that he possessed a hidden power capable of subverting any expectation. For the great mass of students, the exam represented the only chance of survival. It was the bloody stage where they would need to fight monsters to attract the attention of the great guilds. The reward justified the mortal risk. The winning team would have the supreme honor of being recruited directly by the Imperial Guild, the most powerful organization in the nation. Reaching that level meant guaranteeing a place at the top of the social hierarchy. It was the absolute ascension that all those desperate young people craved. Suddenly, the aggressor's hostility transformed into a false and disturbing camaraderie. He hugged Ma Long, revealing that this intimidation had a hidden strategic purpose. He didn't just want to humiliate them, he needed bodies. Arrogantly, he announced that, by recruiting those useless people, his team of 10 members was finally complete for the competition. The group of delinquents celebrated the formation of the team, certain that victory was guaranteed. Ironically, they believed that the group's brute strength would prevail, without knowing who they had just invited. The trio was labeled as the weakest team. The humiliation was palpable as they remained with their heads down, accepting the judgment of others. One of the colleagues, visibly nervous, scratched his head worried about how long Si Chen was taking inside the test chamber. Mockery echoed through the courtyard. The other students were sure that the boy would fail miserably and already considered the test over, ready to leave. The disdain was so great that they were already planning the fun for the night. One of them suggested going to karaoke, completely ignoring the pending result. The group leader agreed with the suggestion. With a confident smile, he decided to gather the team members to leave immediately. However, the results screen came to life. To everyone's surprise, Si Chen's name appeared classified as Upper Level Rank D. The teammates, previously discouraged, were paralyzed. Their eyes widened in absolute shock when they saw that unexpected classification. The shock soon gave way to uncontrollable euphoria. One of the friends shouted and pointed at the screen, vibrating with the turnaround in the team's destiny. The smug smile instantly disappeared from the rivals' faces. They stammered and sweated cold, unable to believe the ranking that had just been revealed. Meanwhile, inside the machine, the test continued connected directly to the user's physiology, monitoring every beat and reaction. Si Chen, however, remained impassive. He knew that this result had been obtained using only his ordinary physical body, without even changing classes. When analyzing his data, the young man found that his basic attributes at level 10 were exactly equivalent to the upper rank D of that system. But he decided it was time to test his real limits. A bluish energy began to emanate from his hand as he concentrated power. Si Chen activated his true form, the Doomfang King. His body was coated in a freezing aura, guaranteeing immunity to cold and increased resistances. The system reacted instantly to the abrupt increase in power. On the external screen, the previous classification began to fail and distort before the astonished audience. The evaluation system finalized the processing, suddenly displaying a rank C classification on the monitor. The audience immediately erupted, shouting in confusion at that abrupt and inexplicable change in the results. The leader of the rivals stared at the screen in disbelief, refusing to accept that low grade as something legitimate. Even the examiners were perplexed, questioning the reason for that ranking fluctuation never seen before. Meanwhile, the biological core of the machine began to react, showing visible signs of overload and stress. Inside the simulation, Si Chen was not shaken. He initiated the class change process, aware that his true power surpassed that evaluation. An overwhelming aura took over the environment when the young man released his Purgatory Rakshasa form to test his limits. Si Chen's stats were revealed in all their glory, displaying the attributes of a stellar warrior. The monitoring system reached its critical point, with the machine's eye dilating under the extreme pressure of that energy. Si Chen's power overflowed into reality, manifesting as a stormy vortex of dark energy in the skies. XML outside, the spectators looked up, terrified and uncomprehending of the origin of that atmospheric anomaly. Fear soon gave way to amazement, with the students recognizing that they were witnessing a historic celestial phenomenon. Back at the control panels, the level graphs began to fail, unable to quantify the strength presented. The algorithm tried to calculate the young man's potential, but the magnitude of the power only generated visual errors and corrupted data on the screen. Faced with that impossible reading, the veteran instructors lost all composure, shouting in absolute shock. One of the observers felt a cold sweat run down his face. The situation was completely out of control, and confusion took over his mind. The evaluation system collapsed. Red danger alerts began to appear, indicating an imminent critical failure in the data reading. The technology couldn't process the information. The error messages multiplied, flashing frantically as the machine struggled in vain to maintain stability. Panic set in among those present. The magnitude of the error and the energy released caused terror to replace any other emotion on the faces of the audience. The physical structure of the machine gave way. Unable to contain such pressure, the equipment exploded violently, throwing debris and flames around the room. Faced with the destruction, the examiners abandoned any protocol. The instinct for survival spoke louder as they ran desperately away from the danger. When the smoke began to clear, concern returned. An instructor shouted amidst the rubble, trying to find out if the student had survived the disaster. However, as he approached the wreckage, the man's expression froze. What he witnessed there left him in a state of absolute shock. The demonic core, the vital source of the test, was withered and lifeless. The entity had been completely drained and killed during the process. Si Chen watched the result coldly. He knew he had overloaded the core to destruction, but realized that something extra had been gained from it. The young man stood under the sparking wires and the carcass of the machine. He was the only thing intact and imposing in that scene of devastation. Suddenly, an intense emerald glow lit up his gaze. The power of the absorbed core began to activate a new function within his mind. Si Chen's perception transformed instantly. He could now see floating data about the crowd, revealing the exact power level of each person present. His eyes glowed with a supernatural light. With this newly awakened ability, the young man understood that he now possessed an absolute tactical advantage over everyone. Gong Ting observed the result with an analytical look. He immediately realized that this student, like himself, was hiding the true extent of his strength. Suddenly, panic gripped the technical team. The veteran instructors were stunned in front of the portal, unsure how to react to the catastrophic equipment failure. Chaos spread through the stadium as the team ran to notify the higher authorities. Si Chen, however, remained calm and indifferent amidst the commotion he had caused. His friends completely ignored the confusion around them. They celebrated euphorically, validating their faith in their colleagues' talent and already thinking about the celebratory meal. The celebration was interrupted by the approach of a shocked veteran. He could hardly believe the rumors about the rank S potential that had just been revealed. The student council member exploded in fury. He confronted Si Chen, yelling at him, accusing him of irresponsibility for the destruction of the valuable demonic core and demanding satisfaction. The protagonist's patience, however, had limits. Energy began to crackle in his hand, signaling that he would not accept that disrespect passively. With a threatening look, Si Chen considered a drastic solution. He coldly pondered whether he should just incapacitate the noisy man right there to end the annoyance. Before violence erupted, Gong Ting appeared to intervene. In an authoritative tone, he reprimanded the council member, demanding respect for his new companion. The statement left everyone present confused. No one understood where that sudden alliance had come from, questioning the use of the word companion. Gong Ting maintained his elegant and confident posture. He knew exactly the value of the rough diamond he had found and was determined to act. Ignoring the gazes of others, he extended his hand. The invitation was made formally. He wanted Si Chen to join his team for the final combat exam. The protagonist stared at the outstretched hand with skepticism. Si Chen assessed the man in front of him, pondering the implications of that unexpected proposal. The audience was shocked to witness the scene. The fact that Gong Ting, a prominent figure, personally invited someone to his team completely changed the dynamics of the exam. The council member felt panic grow. He gritted his teeth, realizing that the situation had gotten out of his control and that he would have difficulty explaining that disaster to his leaders. Si Chen listened to the threats with complete indifference. The rival, desperate to validate his position, shouted about the supposed supremacy of his team at the school, trying to intimidate the young man with his status. Ignored, the other student lost his temper and grabbed Si Chen's shoulder, forcing a physical confrontation that the protagonist clearly did not want. Holding back his irritation, the aggressor forced a menacing smile. He tried to turn the situation into a sarcastic invitation, welcoming him to the team with a poorly disguised hostility. The response was immediate. With a brusque movement, Si Chen pushed the rival's hand away, making it clear that he had no interest in that interaction and ordering him not to bother him anymore. Without looking back, the young man began to walk away. The rival group was paralyzed, unable to process the audacity of someone who simply turned their backs on them. It dawned on the group leader. The disbelief plastered on his face soon gave way to the humiliation of being so publicly rejected by someone he considered inferior. Si Chen, however, kept his gaze focused and cold. There was no fear or hesitation in his posture, just a silent determination that contrasted with the chaos around him. He walked straight past everyone, including Gong Ting. To Si Chen, the power struggles and reputation of that team meant absolutely nothing. As he walked away, a reddish glow emanated from his gaze. Something was awakening within him, a hidden force that the other students couldn't yet comprehend. The humiliation was too much for the rival to bear. Exploding with rage, he shouted insults at Si Chen's back, unable to accept that his authority had been so easily dismissed. The crowd watched in disbelief. No one could believe that Si Chen had the audacity to reject not only the bully, but also the direct intervention of the student council president. The whispers started immediately. Some speculated that, despite his average rank in the test, Si Chen aimed for first place on his own, ignoring the established hierarchies. The atmosphere changed quickly. Those who previously feared the dominant group now laughed at the situation, admiring Si Chen's unexpected courage in defying the veteran's arrogance. Gong Ting, on the other hand, maintained his composure. Far from being offended, he smiled, realizing that this mysterious student had his own goals and would not be easily controlled. With the conflict dissipated, life on campus resumed its course. However, Si Chen's public refusal left a mark, subtly altering the balance of power in that schoolyard. The instructor commented with some frustration that he expected to see a new school record set that year. The woman next to him, however, disagreed with a slight smile. She thought the chaotic unfolding of events made the situation much more interesting than a simple test. Meanwhile, the delinquent was furious with Si Chen's attitude. He eagerly offered to chase after the boy and teach him a violent lesson in the president's name. Gong Ting rejected the offer immediately with a look of disdain. He questioned whether the subordinate really considered him petty enough to order such a low attack. The student council president maintained his authoritative posture, calculating his next steps in silence while observing the situation. The henchman was shocked, not understanding the leader's passivity in the face of such disrespect. Gong Ting, however, had much deeper concerns than a simple schoolyard fight. In his thoughts, the president's true motivation emerged. He decided that he could not allow anyone, not for a second, to threaten to steal his #1 spot. To ensure there were no misunderstandings, Gong Ting physically intimidated the subordinate. The boy panicked, realizing the real danger in the leader's attitude. Far away, Si Chen continued his solitary walk. He coldly dismissed his teammates, warning that he had no intention of participating in their social plans. With a menacing glint in his eye, the protagonist reinforced his total indifference. He made it clear that the machinations of that school had nothing to do with him. The rival watched Si Chen's departure with an expression of disbelief, trying to process that level of absolute disdain. Soon, the confusion turned into malice. The delinquent smiled in a distorted way, understanding that Si Chen's withdrawal left him free to act as he pleased. The news spread quickly across campus. In other corners of the school, students talked in surprise about the fact that Si Chen had simply abandoned the place. Upon confirming the information, the rival let out a maniacal laugh. The protagonist's absence seemed to be exactly what he wanted to regain control. He crushed a can with his foot, releasing his repressed aggression. That violent gesture signaled that the tension at the school was far from over. Away from the school gates, the atmosphere changed drastically. The maniacal smile of a rival indicated that, outside the campus, the rules of conduct were very different. Si Chen, however, seemed oblivious to any threat. Walking with his headphones on, he maintained absolute tranquility, isolating himself from the world around him. His mind wandered through recent memories of power and chaos. He recalled the overwhelming energy of the dimensional rifts he had witnessed. The young man stopped for a moment, his gaze focused. He knew exactly what he needed to do next. A plan had already been drawn up. The priority was to obtain financial resources. He headed to an imposing trading house, a place specializing in high-value transactions for hunters. Upon entering the premises, he was greeted with the standard reverence from the staff. The luxurious environment contrasted with his discreet and solitary presence. The interior of the store displayed an impressive arsenal. Si Chen observed the elite weapons and equipment on display, confirming that he was in the right place for serious business. Without wasting time on formalities, he dumped his spoils on the counter. Claws and fragments of beasts scattered, producing a dry sound. The appraiser, a man with glasses, examined one of the pieces with skepticism. He questioned the origin of the material, doubting that a simple student could possess it. The atmosphere at the counter became tense. While the man showed disbelief, Si Chen awaited the verdict in silence, watched by the assistant. The employee, unlike her boss, seemed shocked. She stared at the item with wide eyes, recognizing something that the appraiser seemed to ignore. The man, however, dismissed the items with arrogance. He began to lecture the young man, classifying the material as low-level garbage, useful only for turning to dust. With an expression of disdain, the appraiser mocked the sales attempt. He was convinced that Si Chen was trying to scam the store with useless items. He adjusted his tie, boasting about the exclusivity of the establishment. He stated that they only dealt with the elite and high-ranking items, using this as an excuse not to recognize the material. Si Chen completely ignored the seller's arrogance. Indifferently, he just checked his cell phone, as if that man's opinion was irrelevant to the success of his plan. Si Chen entered the commercial establishment, where the team was already waiting for him. The atmosphere was sophisticated, but the employee's posture suggested that this would be a purely bureaucratic transaction. The exchange process was started immediately. The attendant's gloved hands received the dark container, preparing to evaluate the spoils that the young man had brought from the rift. The protagonist observed the value displayed on the tablet screen. The price offered for the initial item seemed to be within expectations for the current market. He made a quick calculation of his personal finances. That amount would be exact to cover the rent for now, which solved his most immediate concern. However, Si Chen still had more to offer. He activated his dimensional storage, manifesting a digital energy that began to take shape in his hand. From the void, he materialized a gigantic and threatening weapon. The blade emanated an intense purple aura, revealing that this was no ordinary equipment. The employee recoiled instinctively, startled by the sudden appearance of the object. The mere presence of that weapon exerted an intimidating pressure in the room. With a heavy thud, the blade collided against the counter. The young woman tried to intervene in panic, fearing that the excessive weight and sharp points would damage the store's furniture. The veteran appraiser, who had previously maintained an arrogant posture, was stunned. He was sweating cold, admitting that he had never seen anything like it in all his years of working there. A new figure, wearing an elegant suit, approached upon noticing the commotion. His experienced eyes immediately realized that the classification of that item was far beyond the standard. The bespectacled employee tried to laugh, refusing to believe reality. He mocked the idea that a poor student could possess something of value, blinded by his own prejudice. The blue-haired man, however, ignored the mockery and adjusted his glasses. With absolute seriousness, he identified and declared the true and impressive classification of the equipment. The revelation of rank S hit the arrogant employee like an electric shock. His expression of scorn completely dissolved, giving way to the dread of having made a colossal mistake. The management's attitude changed in an instant. A vigorous handshake sealed Si Chen's new status, now recognized and treated as someone of great importance. While the manager personally guided Si Chen through the store, the team scrambled to serve. The former critic now bowed in respect, while his colleagues struggled to carry the precious weapon. The protagonist smiled with satisfaction. The person of authority he had been waiting for had finally revealed himself to negotiate. Qingzhi, the head of the Mithril Guild team, maintained a professional and calculating expression behind his glasses as he assessed the visitor. Tea was served, establishing an atmosphere of apparent tranquility for the business conversation that was about to begin. With the enormous weapon resting on the coffee table as collateral, the young man began his proposal bluntly, addressing the executive in front of him. He stipulated the exact amount he wished to obtain as a loan. 1 million, no more, no less. The guild leader couldn't hide his surprise. The amount requested was unexpectedly low for the magnitude of the item offered. Qingzhi argued, incredulous, that that weapon would be worth dozens of times more than the amount requested if it were placed on the open market. However, the young man maintained his firm stance. He assured that he did not want to sell the item, promising to pay off the debt in just 1 month. The executive analyzed the situation with suspicion. Using a rank S item as collateral for such a small loan seemed completely illogical. As he watched the boy drink his tea nonchalantly, Qingzhi tried to decipher his identity. Was he a rich heir on the run, or a prodigy hiding his abilities? The purple blade on the table remained motionless, a silent testament to the power and mystery surrounding that student. The glint in Qingzhi's glasses indicated that he was connecting the facts. A logical deduction began to form rapidly in his mind. With a shrewd smile, he revealed that he knew exactly where the young man studied, identifying the prestigious Awakener University. The coincidences were clear to him. The university's annual exam would take place in a month, and the prize for the winner would cover exactly the proposed debt. Qingzhi smiled cunningly. He realized that the boy's audacious plan depended entirely on his own victory in the upcoming tournament. Qingzhi deduced the boy's strategy immediately. He realized that the young man was counting on winning the exam to pay off the future debt. The executive questioned the sensibility of that bet. He knew that no one would resort to such a risky option if it weren't a desperate last resort. To seal the deal, Qingzhi made a surprising offer. He granted the loan with a 0 interest rate during the first month. The man extended his hand, formalizing the proposal with an invitation. He saw this not only as a business deal, but as the beginning of a strategic alliance. Si Chen remained silent, assessing the manager's posture. He carefully analyzed the intentions behind that sudden generosity. The executive took the moment to ensure the client's loyalty. He asked that his facility be the priority for any future negotiations of the young man. The protagonist understood the sharp business vision of that man. It became clear why Qingji would transform that place into the largest exchange center in the world in the future. Satisfied with the outcome, the manager maintained his professional smile. The negotiation had been successfully concluded for both sides. The contract magic was activated instantly. The system processed the exchange of goods and the transfer of values in a matter of seconds. Si Chen's cell phone vibrated with the bank confirmation. The $1 million amount was credited to his account as soon as the valuable item was delivered as collateral. Qingji observed the client with renewed interest. That young man had proven himself to be an intriguing and resourceful business partner. With the money in hand, the protagonist sought new armaments. However, he was informed that the store did not have any Rank S equipment in stock. Faced with the lack of options in the store, Si Chen decided to act. His hand began to glow with digital particles as he accessed his personal arsenal. The sudden surge of power caught the employees by surprise. Qingji and the assistant watched, stunned, at the energy emanating from the boy. A colossal scythe, shrouded in an intense violet aura, materialized in Si Chen's hands. He wielded the powerful weapon, solving his equipment problem on his own. Si Chen ensured that, despite handing over the item as collateral, his firepower remained intact. He revealed that he still possessed another weapon of similar magnitude in his personal arsenal. The revelation left the store employees in a state of absolute shock. The mere mention of the power that the young man held was something their minds could barely process at that moment. With respect earned and the deal sealed, Si Chen left the establishment. The manager, now showing deep reverence, bid farewell, admiring the exceptional talent of that new generation. Qingji adjusted his glasses, unable to hide a victorious smile. The negotiation had been a resounding success, and his assistant celebrated the golden opportunity they had just secured. Already outside, the protagonist paused for a moment in front of the glass door. It was time to put business aside and focus on the next immediate step in his plan. With the financial resources finally secured, he set his priority. There was an urgent need that needed to be met with that newly acquired money. Without hesitation, Si Chen got into a passing taxi. Time was a scarce resource, and he needed to get to his next destination as quickly as possible. The vehicle dropped him off at the county's long-distance bus terminal. While waiting in the lobby, the atmosphere of the place triggered memories of a difficult past. Bitter memories of his previous life flooded his mind. He recalled with regret the times when his family struggled desperately just to survive financially. Back then, life was a constant and exhausting race. He worked tirelessly making deliveries under pressure, always racing against the clock to make a living. Survival demanded daily sacrifices from him and Uni. Even when the money barely covered the rent and despair knocked, his sister tried to contribute, keeping hope alive. The weight of financial responsibility often weighed him down deeply. However, it was his sister's gentle comfort and resilience that kept him from collapsing in those dark days. He remembered the mix of emotions when holding the admission letter. The crumpled paper in his hands symbolized an academic achievement obtained amidst so many adversities. Back to the reality of the present, anxiety began to arise. Si Chen checked the time, worried when he realized that Yuni's bus should have already arrived, and she had not yet appeared. Suddenly, a familiar shout cut through the air, interrupting his apprehensive thoughts. The young man turned sharply, his senses sharpened as he recognized the voice calling him. It was Si Yun. She was standing there with her luggage, looking as surprised as he was to find him in that unexpected place. The girl didn't hesitate. Her quick steps echoed on the floor as she ran towards her brother. Si Chen widened his eyes, momentarily paralyzed by the shock of seeing her there, right in front of him. She crossed the space between them hastily, ignoring the passers-by as she dragged her yellow suitcase. Without saying a word, Si Yun threw herself at him, wrapping him in a tight hug to make up for lost time. However, the girl's expression changed in an instant. She noticed something alarming in the intensity of that gesture. Si Chen, oblivious to her discomfort, just closed his eyes and smiled, feeling immense relief to have her in his arms again. But he underestimated his own strength. The fraternal hug became an iron grip, causing Si Yun to begin desperately fighting for air. The reaction was explosive. She yelled at him, furious and breathless, questioning whether her brother's intention was to suffocate her right there. To ensure her survival, she had no choice but to deliver a quick and precise blow to his ribs. The touching moment turned into a noisy walk. While Si Chen carried the suitcase and tried to deny the guilt, she continued to reprimand him vigorously. Despite the continuous scolding, The young man watched his sister with a soft look. Her presence brought a peace that he had not felt in a long time. Seeing the bright smile on Si Yun's face reinforced his determination. That was the reason for all his effort. At that moment, he renewed his silent oath. He would do anything to ensure that she never had to suffer again. However, danger lurked in the shadows. A group waited on a deserted street, certain that Si Chen would pass by there on his way home. A group of delinquents waited in the shadows, armed with batons and prepared for the ambush. The violent intention was clear in their postures as they waited for the right moment. The gang leader smiled maliciously, savoring the anticipation. He gave specific orders to ensure that the target learned a painful and definitive lesson. As they watched the victims approach, one of the subordinates hesitated, questioning whether the planned violence would not end up going too far. The leader, however, showed complete contempt for the doubt. The cruelty in his expression made it clear that he did not care about the consequences. He silenced the subordinate immediately with a stern look. There was no room for cowardice or moral questions in that operation. The other group members quickened their pace with their weapons raised, convinced that the target wouldn't stand a chance against their numerical superiority. The leader drew a gleaming blade, revealing his assassin skills and vowing to end what he considered to be Si Chen's arrogance. Completely oblivious to the imminent danger surrounding them, Si Chen and Si Yun continued their leisurely walk down the deserted street. The girl sipped her drink, casting an inquisitive glance at her brother as she tried to read his thoughts. She finally broke the silence, asking directly if he was feeling stressed about the graduation exam. Si Yun continued to observe him from the side as they walked, hoping to detect any signs of nervousness or worry on his face. Suddenly, she decided to change tactics and belted out a high note, trying to liven up the atmosphere with a burst of energy. The young woman began to loudly hum a motivational song about believing in yourself, her voice echoing through the alley as she tried to encourage her brother. Si Chen smiled softly as he listened to the song. His sister's clumsy and genuine attempt to lift his spirits worked, bringing him a sense of peace. His reaction, however, made Si Yun frown immediately, realizing that her brother was enjoying her performance more than the message. Si Yun continued to grumble as she walked, clearly dissatisfied with her brother's evasive attitude. Si Chen, in turn, just watched her with confusion, not understanding the reason for so much sudden frustration. The two proceeded down the silent street, carrying their luggage without imagining that their every step was being watched. Hidden in the shadows, the delinquents watched the pair, awaiting the exact moment for the ambush. One of the aggressors noted with satisfaction that the alley had no cameras, guaranteeing impunity for the imminent attack. However, Si Chen's heightened senses picked up the hostility in the air even before he saw them. The young man stopped and glanced sideways, his eyes betraying that he had already noticed the malicious presence. The gang finally revealed themselves, emerging behind him with weapons raised and violent intentions. Remaining calm, Si Chen opened the earbud case, making a quick decision to protect his sister. Gently, he approached Si Yun to put in the device, blocking out the sound of the outside world. The young man made up a casual excuse about a new song, smiling to disguise the tension of the approaching confrontation. Si Yun was confused by the sudden change in attitude, questioning her older brother's unexpected musical taste. Despite her doubt, she accepted the gesture and closed her eyes, immersing herself in the melody and ignoring the danger behind her. As soon as her attention was diverted, the gentle smile on Si Chen's face vanished instantly. The protagonist's aura changed drastically. His eyes gleamed with power, ready to punish those who dared to threaten them. The gang approached, displaying their inferior ranks with arrogance. They believed that numerical advantage would be enough to intimidate anyone. Unaware of the danger, Si Yun kept her eyes closed. The music filled her mind, completely isolating her from the imminent violence. Si Chen moved away from his sister to draw the focus of the attack. While the soft melody played in her earbuds, the delinquents advanced with weapons raised, thirsty for blood. The protagonist didn't back down. He slipped between the aggressors with supernatural agility, dodging the initial blows with ease. A familiar energy focused in his fist. Memories of his past life surfaced. The year 2160, when he lost everything and failed to protect his family. Determination sparked in his gaze, charged with electricity. He vowed that, this time, fate would be different. With an explosive burst, Si Chen launched himself into the air. The speed of the counterattack caught the enemies off guard, who could barely follow his movement. Even in the face of the demonstration of power, one of the opponents tried to flank, running blindly into what he believed to be an opening. The impact was devastating. Si Chen descended on the enemy with the force of thunder, crushing any attempt at defense with a single blow. The brutality of the attack was visceral. The aggressor's face contorted under the pressure, paying the immediate price for his insolence. Seeing his companion being thrown violently, fear replaced arrogance on the remaining delinquent's face. He realized too late the fatal mistake they had made. While the girl remained immersed in peace and soft melodies, Si Chen continued his silent war, delivering lightning-charged punches just below her perception. Each note of the music coincided with a new impact. The protagonist's fist found its target, erasing any trace of laughter or mockery from the enemies' faces. Panic spread among the gang. Cries of pain echoed through the alley, but remained inaudible to the only person Si Chen wished to protect. It was a one-sided massacre. Si Chen moved like lightning, taking down multiple opponents in a succession of quick and precise blows, clearing the path before the music ended. Si Chen moved like a blur, striking one opponent while effortlessly dodging another. The difference in skill was clear as bodies flew through the air. However, the attack continued. A heavy blow came down from above, intending to crush the protagonist under brute force. The young man didn't back down. He intercepted the attack in the air, blocking the massive fist with unwavering firmness. With a brutal motion, he twisted the aggressor's limb and countered. The violence was precise, calculated to incapacitate instantly. The attacker barely had time to scream as pain flooded his senses. His confidence shattered the moment the bone gave way. Before the scream ended, a fist connected directly against his face. There was no mercy in Si Chen's retaliation. The impact hurled the man against the structure with explosive force. The power of the blow made it clear that the fight was on another level. Witnessing the devastation, fear paralyzed the remaining ones. Terror replaced aggression when they realized the magnitude of the mistake they had made. The enemies internally questioned how someone could possess such strength. Si Chen, however, only increased his intensity, with energy crackling around him. He advanced like lightning through the group. Each movement resulted in more opponents falling before they could even react. Even armed, they were no match. A blade was brandished, only to meet a fist that moved faster than steel. Another aggressor tried his luck with a knife, lunging desperately. Si Chen had already anticipated the move, ready to dismantle the threat. In a pathetic attempt at intimidation, the assassin shouted his title and rank, trying to convince himself of his own superiority. Driven by humiliation and blind fury, he charged forward screaming. The man put all his murderous intent into one last desperate attack. The response was definitive. Si Chen slammed him into the ground with a thunderous blow, silencing the boasting and ending the confrontation instantly. The impact was visceral, shattering any defense the opponent tried to erect. Blood and pain exploded into the air, marking the beginning of a severe punishment. The force of the attack was overwhelming. The leader of the thugs was thrown backward, his body flying helplessly before the physical power he had just encountered. Si Chen didn't just strike, he ran over his opponent. With a punch charged with raw energy, the protagonist dismantled the rival's arrogance in a single fluid movement. The impact deformed the aggressor's face, instantly erasing his smug smile. Pain replaced pride as the violence of the blow took its toll. However, the young man wasn't finished yet. With his eyes shining with contained fury, Si Chen prepared to continue, ensuring that the message was impossible to ignore. Gravity claimed the body of the defeated leader. He spun in the air, completely disoriented and bleeding, reduced to a helpless target falling to ruin. His body collided violently against the structure, the sound of the impact echoing through the place. There was no chance of recovery. The defeat was total and humiliating. The dust settled around the body stretched out on the ground. Si Chen remained standing, watching his work coldly, while a heavy silence took over the environment. The protagonist's gaze burned with intensity. He questioned the rival's understanding, demanding to know what part of his previous warnings had been so difficult to understand. Si Chen reinforced his ultimatum with a terrifying calm. He had already made it clear that he should not be disturbed, and now the consequences of that disobedience were exposed. On the ground, amidst tears and blood, the truth hit the bully. He realized too late that the rank assessment was wrong. Si Chen's power was of a completely different magnitude. Fear paralyzed the aggressor when he felt the cold metal against his skin. Si Chen pressed the blade to his neck, demanding absolute silence under the threat of immediate execution. Terror took over the thug's eyes. He understood, trembling uncontrollably, that this was not a bluff. The murderous intent before him was real and lethal. An oppressive and bloodthirsty aura emanated from Si Chen, manifesting as a demonic shadow. The murderous instinct was so dense that it defied the logic of a simple student. With a sharp and penetrating gaze, Si Chen focused his attention on the next action. He was about to utter his final words, ensuring that fear was etched into the enemy's soul. The confrontation in the alley came to an end, with Si Chen pinning the last opponent against the cracked wall. The force of the impact made it clear who dominated the situation. Around them, the scene was of total devastation. The group that had previously tried to intimidate now lay scattered and unconscious on the cold ground. The last thug went into absolute panic. With a blade dangerously close to his face, he screamed, overwhelmed by the terror of imminent death. Si Chen, however, only watched him. His eyes shone with an inhuman coldness, assessing the miserable life before him. The pressure of the blade increased, drawing tears of despair from the aggressor. He realized that his existence depended entirely on the whim of that monster. But the final blow didn't come. Si Chen plunged the knife into the ground as a silent warning and walked away, leaving the enemy trembling and traumatized behind. Far away, Si Yun seemed oblivious to the massacre, but her emotions were on edge. Tears streamed down her face as she listened to something. The young woman seemed inconsolable, muttering questions about how someone could be so lonely, immersed in a personal drama. Suddenly, she turned to her brother with indignation. Si Yun complained loudly, accusing him of taking that joke too far. Si Chen, ignoring the scolding, suddenly changed the dynamic. Calmly, he extended a small red box towards her. XML. The murderous aura had completely disappeared. The young man now sported a gentle, warm smile, acting as if nothing violent had occurred. The box opened, revealing a luxurious-looking golden pen. The object gleamed, indicating it was something of high value. Si Yun's expression changed instantly. Shock and amazement replaced the tears, leaving her momentarily speechless. Her brother kept his satisfied smile as he offered the gift. He seemed amused by her surprised reaction to the gesture. However, the financial reality weighed on the girl. Holding the item carefully, she hesitated and suggested returning the gift, feeling guilty about the excessive cost. The clenched fist still bore the bloody marks of the recent confrontation. The violence of that moment lingered in the physical memory of the fight. Leaving the chaos behind, Si Chen and the girl walked away from the alley. The scene of destruction was abandoned along with the fallen opponents. On the ground, the defeated aggressors groaned in pain, desperately begging for medical assistance. The brutality of the beating had completely broken their spirit. Later, far from danger, the mysterious pen was tested. The tip glided, creating trails of floating light in the air. The sketch instantly transformed into a glowing, three-dimensional figure. The advanced technology of the object revealed itself before their eyes. Si Yun was delighted, hardly believing the wonder she held in her hands. Surprise and joy replaced her previous fear. The protagonist smiled gently, relieved to have pleased his sister. Her happiness was the only validation he sought at that moment. The young man then devoured the meal she prepared, praising the familiar taste. That domestic moment brought a needed normalcy after the fight. While Si Chen digested contentedly, the mood subtly shifted. Si Yun began to observe him with an inquisitive and suspicious look. Trying to disguise the origin of the funds, the boy made up a vague explanation about earning extra money. His nervous laughter, however, betrayed him. The girl immediately noticed the lie and confronted him about his suspicious behavior. She knew he was hiding important secrets. However, her irritation was short-lived. Si Yun's gaze shifted and softened as she focused on her brother's expression. She realized it had been a long time since she had last seen Si Chen so light and genuinely happy. That sight was rare and precious. In a gesture of silent understanding, the young woman touched his shoulder affectionately. She chose affection over interrogation. With the tension dissipated, Si Yun only advised her older brother to be careful in the future. Her concern was genuine, but gentle. The young protagonist just smiled enigmatically, silently agreeing with the situation presented before him. Meanwhile, in another location, a solitary figure watched the marine life in a large aquarium, discussing the recovery time needed for an injured person. The light-haired man mentioned the recent conflict, highlighting that someone had made the mistake of provoking Si Chen. In the same setting, an elegant woman enjoyed her drink, listening to the conversation with an expression of contained amusement. The speaker, however, was relentless in his judgment. He coldly declared that his team would be much more efficient if it discarded any useless members. A heavy silence hung between the mentor and his protege as they both contemplated the scene ahead, pondering their next actions. Gong Xuan, the director of career services, adjusted his glasses. He seemed tired as he noted that Si Chen's name was, once again, at the center of the problems. The director proceeded with his technical analysis, citing confidential data extracted from the institution's latest internal evaluations. He then confronted his pupil with a harsh truth. There was only one student in the entire school who possessed a higher rating than him. The revelation caught the young man by surprise. The shock was evident in his gaze as he realized his supremacy was being questioned. Gong Xuan, however, was emphatic in his instructions. He ordered the boy to ensure his absolute prominence during the graduation exam, without allowing rivals. The director let a veiled threat hang in the air, suggesting that severe consequences would come if the main plan failed. The woman in the armchair, noticing the tension, gave a malicious smile, seeming entertained by the possibility of that disastrous scenario coming to fruition. Gong Xuan's protege felt the weight of the comparison. A shadow of indignation crossed his face as he prepared his rebuttal. With arrogance, the boy questioned the validity of that analysis. He implied that the results were misleading, as he had never revealed his true power during the ranking tests. The law of nature was clear and merciless. The weak always ended up devoured by the strong. Si Chen watched the scene with indifference. He understood well how that predatory cycle worked in the real world. Later, under the shower water, the young man tried to wash away the fatigue and clear his mind for what was to come. Meanwhile, an authority figure reflected on his own commitments. He needed to ensure that he honored a certain pending agreement. Lying in his bed, Si Chen stared at the system's warning. Time was short. Less than a month remained until the final exam. His mind, however, focused on something much darker, visualizing a corrupted structure. He imagined the colossal tower that stood imposingly in the middle of a hellish and desolate landscape. The base of that place exuded an oppressive and ancient aura, daring anyone to approach the steps. In his mental projections, he walked alone and determined towards that inevitable destiny. The system then displayed his hidden attributes. The title of Grave Hound King revealed a dangerous facet of his power. To the outside world and official records, however, he was just an average rank C. But the truth was that his potential defied logic, exceeding the maximum limits that the system itself could calculate. A sinister and vibrant energy emanated from his other registered form, that of an abyssal demon. The possibilities of evolution presented themselves before him like hidden cards, each path concealing its own mysteries and powers. And at the center of it all was the ultimate item, the SSS rank key, the only one capable of unlocking the forbidden secrets of the Tower of Darkness. The dimensional portal activated with a violent bang, distorting the space around it. Si Chen found himself facing a colossal vortex of purple energy. The scale of the phenomenon indicated that he was leaving the known world behind. The transition was abrupt. The young man felt his body being swallowed by a dense substance, as if he were sinking in deep water. He widened his eyes, suddenly alert. The physical sensation of that new environment was hostile and unexpected. The landing revealed a desolate landscape under a cosmic sky. He had arrived at the dangerous Fallen Star wastelands. The impact was immediate. The protagonist realized that the oppressive atmosphere drastically limited his true power, requiring urgent adaptation. To make matters worse, the escape route disappeared. He understood that the only way to reopen the portal would be by eliminating the boss of that floor. There was no time to plan. A gigantic paw landed next to him, announcing that danger had already found him. The creature revealed itself completely. A phantom lion, a high-level beast emanating a lethal predatory aura. Even with his breathing heavy due to the environment, Si Chen focused his energy. Electrical sparks began to dance on his fingers. The system responded to his call. The class change was completed instantly, reconfiguring his skills to Lightning Assassin. His physical attributes multiplied with the new specialization. A blade made of pure electricity materialized in his hand, ready for combat. The predator did not hesitate and jumped to the slaughter. The young man kept his guard up, facing the beast that was coming towards him. With supernatural speed, he slid under the monster's attack, using the enemy's own charge to create an opening. The counterattack was precise, but the effort took its toll. Si Chen felt his body weigh tons under the overwhelming gravity of that world. Si Chen's attack failed unexpectedly. The system immediately warned that the vital strike and the attempt to paralyze had no effect on the target. The young man widened his eyes in disbelief. Surprise struck him as he realized that his calculation had been inaccurate, and the enemy had escaped unharmed. The beast wasted no time with his hesitation. Taking advantage of the gap in the defense, the monster advanced fiercely to counterattack. The creature's fangs gleamed with a lethal energy, ready to tear the prey before it to shreds in an instant. However, Si Chen reacted on instinct. He channeled his emerging energy and prepared a devastating blow to intercept the charge. The class change was successfully completed. Now, under the moniker of Purgatory Rakshasa, a dark and powerful aura completely enveloped the protagonist. His physical attributes skyrocketed. The new form granted him far superior strength and speed, raising his combat status to a new level. The impact was brutal. The beast's fist collided against Si Chen's reinforced defense, generating an immediate shockwave. With a fluid and violent movement, the young man dominated the creature, throwing it against the ground with overwhelming force. The power of his attack continued to escalate dizzily, multiplying the damage caused hundreds of times every instant. Even fighting against the oppressive gravity of that environment, Si Chen unleashed all his accumulated power in a single roar of effort. The beast, once a predator, now showed pure terror. It realized too late the overwhelming force that was about to destroy it. A pillar of energy obliterated the place. The impact was so intense that it destroyed the ground and swallowed the monster completely amidst the rubble. When the dust settled, Si Chen's body felt the weight of the combat. His hand rested inert, exhausted by the excessive use of power. The protagonist took a deep breath, with sweat running down his face. As he caught his breath, a new thought crossed his mind. The defeated monster dissolved into energy, but something was wrong. Si Chen found it odd that the system hadn't displayed the expected absorption mark. Still panting from the previous combat, he glimpsed the gate to the next floor. Exhaustion weighed him down, but the path ahead revealed itself as inevitable. Suddenly, his danger instincts flared. The young man noticed an abrupt change in the atmosphere around him. He turned his face violently, feeling a lethal presence approach before he even saw it. From the vortex above, multiple beasts plummeted in a coordinated attack. The battle was far from over. It was an ambush. The reaction was too slow. The first creature was already upon him, ready to attack before Si Chen could raise any defense. The impact was brutal. Claws tore his flesh as he was bombarded by successive blows, blood spurting under the ferocity of the group attack. The promise of that portal was infinite pain. He realized too late that overwhelming suffering awaited him. However, even being massacred, his will refused to break. An inner fury screamed that he needed to conquer everything, no matter the cost. Si Chen woke up with a start, his body reacting violently to the vivid terror of that nightmare. He was safe in his room, but the cold sweat and uneven breathing showed that the dream's lesson had been real. The young man understood that there were no shortcuts. That solitary and arduous path was the non-negotiable price to obtain the power he desired. Meanwhile, reality demanded his presence. The team formation ceremony for the combat assessment was about to begin in the university auditorium. The academic authorities were already in their places, impassively awaiting the start of the selection process that would define the students' future. In the audience, the movement began. Tension filled the atmosphere as the students prepared for the final decisions. The students murmured among themselves, finally understanding the reason for the sudden changes in the rules of this year's assessment. The mood in the room became heavy with the revelation. The young man listened attentively as the instructor detailed the new requirements. This time, individual hierarchy mattered less, as it was decreed that each team should have 5 members. The instructor paused deliberately, holding his thermos firmly. He prepared to deliver the most crucial part of the information, keeping the suspense in the air. He then announced that the ranking information for all students had been processed. Without delay, the data was sent directly to the devices on each student's wrists. A wave of activity swept through the auditorium. Immediately, the students activated their bracelets, projecting holographic screens to frantically check the new statistics received. The lists shone in the air, displaying names next to their respective ranks and levels. The class's power hierarchy was now exposed for everyone's judgment. Suddenly, a student froze, pointing his finger at the screen in disbelief. He shouted, shocked by a specific piece of data that seemed to defy all logic. The disbelief was directed at Si Chen. His colleagues couldn't understand how he was listed only as a low-level rank E, the lowest category possible. The confusion spread quickly among the female students nearby. They recalled that the young man had tested as rank C previously, and questioned how his ranking could have plummeted so drastically. The news immediately served as ammunition for his rivals. Scornful glances were cast in his direction, as other students realized the protagonist's apparent fall from grace. Si Chen remained silent before the glowing screen. The class's cruel verdict was obvious. With that abysmal ranking, he would be seen as a burden that no one would want on their team. Laughter echoed through the auditorium. The leader of the delinquents leaned back in his chair, amused by his colleagues' public humiliation and sudden devaluation. The rival's smile, however, transformed into a calculating look. He observed Si Chen with contempt, processing how that new weakness could be exploited to his advantage. Meanwhile, the instructor watched everything from his desk. He remained impassive, watching the social isolation that the data release had instantly provoked. The man adjusted his glasses with a grim thought in mind. He was there to teach a harsh lesson. For certain individuals, disqualification came even before the battle began.